Bring in show music, please.
This is Squawk Pod, and I'm CNBC producer Cameron Costa. On today's episode, it's the day global investors have been waiting for. Fed Chair Jay Powell gives his Jackson Hole address, but one other Fed governor is in the headlines for a different reason, unpacking the mortgage fraud allegations against economist Lisa Cook with former Assistant Attorney General Jonathan Kanter.
It does raise questions about whether somebody is being singled out simply because you don't like their policy positions. If that is the case, then that is an abuse of power.
And tennis, anyone? Brad Gilbert, coach and former pro, on the unique challenges of playing a game that has exploded in global popularity again.
The greatest thing about coaching is you're trying to help somebody fulfill their dreams, try to help them become better.
Plus, the rest of today's news, like Musk and Zuck, strange bedfellows, and chips, everybody wants a piece of chip makers.
These companies didn't want the money, and they don't want the equity stake.
It's Friday, August 22nd, and Squawk Pod begins right now.
Stand Becky by in 3, 2, 1. Cue it, please.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Squawk Box here on CNBC. We're live from the NASDAQ market site in Times Square. I'm Becky Quick along with Andrew Ross Sorkin. Joe is off today. It's Friday. Here we go.
Well, today's the day. This week's marquee economic event set to take place in just a couple of hours from now. Federal Reserve Chair Jay Powell, he's going to be delivering the keynote address at the Kansas City Fed's Economic Symposium in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, basically just known as Jackson Hole at this point. It's going to be Powell's final speech headlining that conference in the Grand Tetons. The Wall Street Journal reporting this morning that Powell is expected to detail changes to the Fed's policy framework and effectively move away from the central bank's recent focus on risks stemming from what was then near zero interest rates and low prices. In light of higher inflation, those are no longer seen as the most pressing issues. Powell's going to be laying out conclusions from a months-long review by the Fed when he speaks at about 10 a.m. Eastern time. And, of course, CNBC will bring you it all live as it's happening. And afterward, we're going to have a first on CNBC interview with Cleveland Fed President Beth Hammack. So we've got a lot going on this morning, and we'll be spending some time with Steve Leisman, of course, who is in the Grand Tetons with that beautiful shot behind him.
It's been interesting hearing some of the differing opinions now coming out from some of these Fed officials, because as the conditions have changed, as we've heard more about what's happening on the jobs front, there is an expectation among some parties that you might see this Fed cut rates. But you're kind of seeing a Fed that's not nearly as unified as it had been to this point because of the differing data points.
What did you make of all the retail numbers this week? In that, to me, there was two things going on. You had the Walmarts of the world saying, look, we're absorbing the price hikes, but effectively saying we're absorbing them as long as we can.
Right.
And so, which raises the prospect, do we get to the fall? And is effectively what Doug McMillan is saying is price hikes are going to eventually come. Is that his sort of backwards way of saying that? And if that's true, how does that affect this?
Yeah, I actually went back and forth with Matt Shea, the head of the National Retail Federation yesterday, just asking him what he's seeing on a broader point after we heard from all these retailers. And he said, look, consumers on the lower income levels are really struggling at this point. That's been the case for a while. You've also been seeing consumers in the mid-level trade down, to go to Walmart. They've been getting more and more people who make more than $100,000 a year that have been shopping there. At the higher ends, you still have some pretty flush spending and people feeling good about things. You did see July numbers for most of these retailers that looked better than they had seen in the couple of months leading up to that. Right. Some people say that's weather. That was certainly a factor with Home Depot and Lowe's because you did get some better summer weather, and that got people out to maybe spend things in the garden and the outside that they hadn't been spending on before. But I think it is an inflection point. I think it's hard to get your arms around where things stand right now. I think Jay Powell is very likely to lay out how difficult it is and the risks that they're facing on both sides, whether you're worried about the jobs market really slowing down or whether you're worried about the risk of inflation, how things pick up down the road. My guess is, and I don't know this, but if you listen to Leisman, he'll say a lot of these things too. My guess is he'll try and steer clear of either completely taking a cut off the table or guaranteeing and locking one in. Maybe they've got one more jobs report they can take a look at before their next meeting. So maybe they lay it out those ways, but obviously so many people are riding on this because normally this is where the Fed will really lay out their vision for how they see things over the coming months. In the meantime, the Justice Department is going to be investigating Federal Reserve Governor Lisa Cook after she was accused by a Trump administration official of mortgage fraud. Ed Martin, a lawyer at the DOJ who has investigated Democratic officials in the past, wrote to the Fed chair, Jay Powell, that circumstances surrounding Cook's mortgages require further attention. He also asked Powell to remove Cook from the Federal Reserve Board, saying, "Do it today before it's too late. After all, no American thinks it is appropriate that she serve during this time with a cloud hanging over her head." In fact, the Federal Reserve Chair does not have the authority to remove Cook. The Fed declined to comment when contacted by CNBC, but we are going to talk more about this story. And Nvidia has reportedly asked some of its component suppliers to stop production related to the H20 chip, which is less powerful than the company's high-end processors and is engineered for the Chinese market. A report from The Information says that Nvidia told Samsung and Arizona-based Amkor Technology to halt production. A separate report from Reuters says that Nvidia has asked Foxconn to stop working on the H20 chip. China has reportedly pushed for domestic tech companies to hold off buying those chips over security and other concerns. In Taiwan today, Nvidia's chief, Jensen Huang, reiterated to reporters that Nvidia's chips don't have security backdoors. That's been a big issue. There's been a lot of talk about it. But Nvidia has been very forward in kind of saying, no, we don't do that. There is no backdoor. There is no way into any of these chips. You can see Nvidia shares this morning down by about 1.1%, Samsung up by about 1.1%, and then Amkor Technology off by 2.2%.
But I think the bigger thing with this piece of news, if we make the implication that the Chinese government may actually be trying to get away from Nvidia chips, that's the other piece of this, is ultimately when you get into this sort of, Eric Schmidt, I think, coined the term many years ago, splinter net. This idea that the internet was going to be completely splintered, which it basically already is. But now we're going to get into a splinter net as it relates to hardware.
AI?
Well, yeah, no, as it relates to hardware, which is to say, I think ultimately the Chinese, even though they kind of want these chips now, the Nvidia chips now, are ultimately going to stop buying our chips. I think that's embedded in that whole story that I was looking through last night, is this idea that the Chinese would prefer not to do business ultimately with Nvidia if they could.
Look, the other part of the problem, and they talked about this yesterday on Squawk on the Street, is that Howard Lutnick, the Commerce Secretary, has been pretty open about saying, hey, we're just giving them garbage chips. These aren't second-rate chips. They're not third-rate. They're fourth of the line. So the idea that he was talking about that very openly and bluntly, saying we're only allowing really old stuff like our hand-me-downs to go to them, I think that's part of the pushback on this, too. We don't want fourth-rate hand-downs. And there is this push to build a new chip that would not be as outdated as the H20, and you get into the security questions again. So it's a very difficult line to walk between pleasing American authorities and Chinese authorities at the same time, too.
Now to the government potentially taking stakes in businesses that receive chips or received money as part of that CHIPS Act. The Wall Street Journal reporting the Trump administration now considering those stakes, but not for large chip companies that are increasing their investments in the U.S. So the Journal saying that executives from Taiwan Semiconductor have spoken about giving back money to the government as it asks for an equity stake. This is the point that I've been making all week, Becky, about this, which is that these companies didn't want the money and they don't want the equity stake. And we could have never gone to them 2 or 3 years ago when this was first put into place and said, hey, you want the money? Give us an equity stake. These guys, even now, with the tariffs, are saying, talk to the hand. We don't want this. We don't want you to take an equity stake in us. Separately, Reuters reporting the White House, that is, considering a new plan to try to divert, effectively, some of the $2 billion of CHIPS Act funding to projects dealing with critical minerals. It's unclear if the administration would use that money for grants to businesses or equity stakes in mining companies. So a lot of different twists and turns this is all taking this morning.
It is interesting to see some of this money being diverted. The rare earths minerals was a huge deal. China's been able to get some leverage because of that. So we see other areas in the supply chain that we really need to beef up a bit and go through some of these things. I did hear an interview earlier today with the former vice president, Mike Pence. He's a hardline conservative, old school conservative. He's opposed to any of these issues where the government is getting involved in these things. He's
Right.
old school conservatism where you want to keep an arm's length distance between the government and businesses. But again, it gets wrapped up in the security question, this national security question, and we saw how important that was during COVID. We saw how weak some of our supply chains were and how reliant we were on other places for things that we had no ideas about. Even remember some of the pieces, like you couldn't find the pieces to go through for shots to give to people. Like, we don't manufacture any of those things here anymore. So it's a lot.
This one may come as a surprise for you. Elon Musk tried to enlist Meta's Mark Zuckerberg to help finance a nearly $100 billion takeover of OpenAI. That's according to court filings in a case between Musk and OpenAI. Now, Musk helped found OpenAI, as you'll remember, which back then was a not-for-profit in 2015. In February of this year, he floated that proposal to buy the AI giant. Musk had earlier sued OpenAI, upset over its attempt to transform into a for-profit entity. Now, OpenAI has made counterclaims against Musk. As part of its complaint, OpenAI has filed to subpoena Meta for communications between the company, Zuckerberg and Musk. The new court filing says that neither Meta nor Zuckerberg signed a letter of intent offered by Musk and his AI company, XAI, when they were pursuing that bid for OpenAI. Meta's spokesperson declined to comment. Musk's attorney didn't respond to a request for comment, but in the continued strange bedfellows, I have a vision of them fighting in the Coliseum or in a cage, if you remember, Musk and Zuckerberg, and then you can imagine them hugging it out and trying to take on
the enemy
Sam
of
Altman.
My enemy is my friend.
Somehow.
Who's your bigger enemy when it comes down to it? I know they've had this long and tortuous relationship. I think it goes back even further, like 8 years back to when a SpaceX explosion blew
That's
up
when
a
it started.
Facebook satellite.
Yeah.
And you're right, the cage match probably was peak animosity between the two. But again, strange bedfellows are made because you have to go after your bigger competitor, your bigger enemy. And they didn't sign the deal anyway. Yeah.
Next on Squawk Pod, former U.S. Assistant Attorney General Jonathan Kanter. What's at stake for Lisa Cook, Fed governor in the hot seat amid allegations of mortgage fraud?
To establish criminal fraud, you would have to establish beyond a reasonable doubt not only that she did something that was incorrect, but she had the intent to commit a crime. That's a very high standard.
It's not a typical DOJ case, he says. More to come after this break. And we're back. This is Squawk Pod.
You're watching Squawk Box right here on CNBC. I'm Becky Quick along with Joe Kernan, who's not here today, and Andrew Ross Sorkin. Andrew and I are holding down the fort, right?
Summer Friday.
It is.
The Department of Justice is investigating Federal Reserve Governor Lisa Cook over allegations of fraud related to her mortgages. A letter signed by DOJ attorney Ed Martin also urging Fed Chair Jerome Powell to remove Cook from the central bank's board, though, in fact, he doesn't have the power to do that. Joining us right now to help us understand the allegations against Cook, some of the rules, and how this could all play itself out. Former Assistant Attorney General Jonathan Kanter. He's a CNBC contributor, a distinguished law professor at Washington University in St. Louis. And you have a beautiful shot of Washington right behind you, my friend. It's nice to see you this morning. Help us understand. I just want to know, when you first heard this news, did you immediately say this is a terrible crime? Did you say there's something else going on? Did you think about weaponization? What was going on in your head?
Yeah, the first thing that jumped out to me, Andrew, is that this is not something that the Department of Justice would normally investigate. There's a difference between the court of law and the court of public opinion. In the court of law, this is small ball and very difficult to prove. You'd have to establish not only that she filled out the form incorrectly, but she had the specific intent to deceive, to defraud banks, as opposed to just making a mistake. And so it's not something ordinarily the Department of Justice would investigate and use its scarce resources to address. Now, that's separate from the question of public opinion. People might feel that this makes her unfit for the job, but that's usually something that comes up in the context of a confirmation hearing, or, again, a question about whether she's fit for the public trust.
Jonathan, but let's separate then, because I think there's a couple of things going on. Let's separate the legality issue from the prosecution of this issue from how this might have all started. We'll separate them as separate issues. On the legal issue alone, you do agree or believe that it's illegal to lie on your application. And I know you said that it's hard to prove, but I would imagine typically in this kind of context, unless there's a reasonable excuse for it, that the reason you would be saying that you have two primary homes at the same time is because you want the lower rate, and you would know that that's wrong.
Right. So there's really a question about whether there is a technical legal violation and whether somebody engaged in criminal fraud. So to establish criminal fraud, you would have to establish beyond a reasonable doubt not only that she did something that was incorrect, but she had the intent to commit a crime. That's a very high standard, and appropriately so. It means that we're not going to take away someone's liberty rights unless they're really a criminal.
Hey, Jonathan, can I follow up on this, though? Because I've spent a lot of time trying to think this through. I've got multiple mortgages. It would never occur to me to say that one of these other houses was my primary residence because, first of all, I wouldn't think that the lenders wouldn't figure that out anyway, but it's wrong. And the reason that there are higher mortgage rates on second or third mortgages is because you are much more likely to walk away from that and leave the bank holding the bag. So it doesn't feel like it's a victimless crime any more than insurance fraud feels like a victimless crime. Insurance fraud causes everybody else's rates to go up. Mortgage fraud causes everybody else's rates to go up because the banks have to realize that there's going to be a certain amount of failure that comes through on this. The circumstances are strange, and I've tried to think through. I know there are some cases where a mortgage lender will say, yeah, it's okay for you to do that if you were buying a property for an elderly relative or for a disabled child, or if you really had job circumstances where you were going back and forth. I don't know all the facts on this, but what what Bill Pulte has put out suggests that she put one of those properties, she did these within a couple of weeks of each other, and then soon afterward put one of those properties up on the rental market. I would anticipate that someone who's sitting on the Federal Reserve Board would understand what a primary residence is. And you're right. I don't know how they got about. You may look askance at how any of this came out. You may not. You may doubt the whistleblower accusations on some of these things. You may think it was an active investigation. But as Andrew said, let's separate the two. It doesn't seem to me, and it may be widespread, there may be 22,000 cases of this, but it doesn't seem to me like a victimless crime, and it is something that we should crack down on.
Yeah, and to be clear, Becky, I don't necessarily disagree with the underlying premise of what you're saying, which is that if you defraud the bank, it is and can be and should be a crime. The question, I guess, that I'm trying to address is realistically, what has to go into proving that in order to establish beyond a reasonable doubt that somebody violated the Title 18 and should be subjected to prison or such fines or large fines. And as a practical matter, it's not something typically the DOJ would investigate because there's a lot of this stuff. Whether they could, they certainly could if they wanted to, and they could certainly bring a case. Just in my experience, it's not the easiest kind of case to prove in the absence of a broader evidence of ongoing fraud.
And let me ask you a separate question, unrelated to the politics of it. Do you think that somebody's role in society changes whether they should be prosecuted or not? So you might say, okay, typically we don't go after these things. But in this instance, if you were on the board of the Fed or the CEO of a bank and you were doing this, part of what I imagine, and you and I have actually talked about, you used the word deterrence many years ago. I remember we talked about the word deterrence. Do you say to yourself, okay, well, we don't normally go after this, but this is putting the politics of it aside, a high value target from a deterrence perspective?
Yeah, there's a question of what should be the case and what is the case. I mean, we can look back and you can look at Martha Stewart and a whole bunch of other, notable prosecutions where you might shrug your shoulders and wonder why the government used its resources for something that might not have been victimless, but relatively insignificant in the grand scheme of the problems that we suffer throughout the world and the kind of crime that goes on a daily basis. As a legal matter, as a technical legal matter, that information about in a criminal case would be prejudicial. It's probably not, unless it related to her job. It's not likely a court would allow evidence of somebody's position to come in, especially in this case if the conduct occurred before she was on the board of governors. It's kind of like a stoplight. It doesn't matter if you're in a yellow Ferrari or a champagne Corolla, you still have to stop at the stoplight. The law applies equally to everybody.
Right.
It reminds me of, remember all the government officials who got chased out because they were hiring nannies under the table and not paying them on the books? You can go back, that was probably 15, 20 years ago, but there were a series of them who had done things that were pretty commonplace among other people. But if you are a public official, you're going to be held to a higher standard.
Yeah, Becky, so this is why I think it's important to distinguish between the court of law and the court of public opinion. These kinds of things do come up quite frequently in confirmation hearings to determine whether somebody is fit to hold office. That's usually the proper place to have this conversation, including the one we're having right now, right?
Although if we find out somebody lied about their resume after the fact, they've gotten chased out for that too.
They have, but again, the question is, how are we going to enforce that fairly across the entire federal government, or are we just going to use it when we disagree with somebody over a particular policy question?
So, Jonathan, the next sort of political piece is, look, there are some people, Democrats, you're a Democrat, who look at this and say, this is a weaponization of the government. We don't know exactly how this allegation first emerged. I believe that Pulte suggested that it came from a tip. Who is the tippee? Is that somebody inside? Is that somebody outside? Is it Pulte himself? I mean, right? Like, these are the other questions that have emerged, which then raise questions about sort of how this government is using its authorities. How do you think about that? If you could somehow take any of your politics out of it?
Yeah, so I had a very powerful position in the government where I would be able to bring cases, sign indictments that would effectively take away people's liberty rights. When you're in that position, it's an awesome responsibility, and the power that you have is incredible and can have significant effect on people. You have to use it without fear or favor. And so as much as you might want or have instincts to be political about it, when you're talking about criminal prosecution, you have an obligation as a prosecutor really to look at things in very neutral terms and make sure that you are giving people their due process and using the great force of the United States government and the court system appropriately for the right reasons, which is to enforce the law. Again, I'm not taking a position on whether they should or shouldn't hear. It does raise questions about whether somebody is being singled out simply because you don't like their policy positions. If that is the case, then that is an abuse of power in and of itself and is something that raises huge questions about its appropriateness.
And what is your sense in this context? Do you have an early take?
Well, again, you really don't want to prejudge these things. The context here raises questions about, again, whether somebody's being singled out because of their policy positions. If that is the case, and I take no position, I don't know whether it is or isn't, then it's a problematic. But taking Pulte for his word, if it's simply an ordinary referral, that's fine. But the Justice Department has an obligation to make sure that it's using its responsibility and its prosecutorial discretion and authority appropriately, not simply in retaliation for a policy position.
All right. Jonathan, it is great to see you. Enjoy the weekend. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Talk
You
to
too.
you soon. You bet.
Tease will be next.
Coming up on Squawk Pod, Grand Slam tennis tournament, the U.S. Open, kicks off this weekend. Coach and former pro Brad Gilbert joins us for a lively discussion of the game and its impact way beyond business.
If you play tennis 2-3 times a week after you're 35 years old, for the rest of your life, you'll live 9.7 years longer than everyone else.
Wow, forget Ozempic.
Yeah.
Play tennis.
You gotta hit the court. The more you know. We'll be right back. You're listening to Squawk Pod today with Becky Quick and Andrew Ross Sorkin. Here's Andrew.
Up and Andrew, Q.
Welcome back to Squawk Box. Tennis taking over New York City. This is the start of it. The U.S. Open starting next week. Players compete for the biggest payday in tennis history, $5 million for the men's and women's singles champion. Fan Week and mixed doubles competition kicked off this week. For the latest, I want to bring in former tennis pro coach Brad Gilbert. It is great to see you at the table, sir.
Good morning. How are you? And Fan Week has become massive. They had 78,000 for the 2 days of mixed doubles, Tuesday and Wednesday. So obviously they played that this year much earlier. They'll have well over 150,000 for the Fan Week. So this
Even in the lousy weather this week, everybody turns out.
Yeah, amazing. See, this used to be a 2-week tournament.
Right.
And now it's become completely a 3-week extravaganza. And it literally starts on Monday. And now the tournament this year, for the first time, the main draw starts on Sunday. So an extra day, 15 days. And they'll draw over 1 million fans for the tournament.
Is this why the prize money is so much bigger? I know the players have been wanting more prize money, but it seems like if you're getting bigger, you're getting more fans, they should get their share of it.
Absolutely. And we added a 15th day, which obviously makes the tournament go into 3 weekends, more TV revenue, more sponsorship dollars. So definitely the players got a little bit.
More time from the players, too.
Absolutely. And I think it will continue to go up.
In terms of these big purses, how does that change the game, if it does at all?
You know where it changes, Andrew, is for players that are lower ranked,
right,
who are struggling, week in and week out. And when they get into the majors, it makes a difference for them for the next 6 months. For the players at the top, it doesn't change it. Obviously, whether or not you win 3.6 or 5 million.
I'd like 5 more.
Everybody would. But obviously, the players at the top, they're making way more money off the court. So they're doing fine. But the fact that they've raised money dramatically in the first few rounds, in doubles, in qualies, makes a difference to a lot of players.
Okay, so who are you picking this year? What do you think's going to happen here?
Let's start on the men's side.
Okay, because we, by the way, have a lot of gamblers who like to want to bet on this. There's a guy named Joe Kernan who sits in your seat.
You cannot beat the juice. 10% VIG, listen, if you win 55% of the time, you lose money. So good luck betting week in and week out, but I do understand the numbers.
Okay.
I'll give you a simple number. Sinner and Alcaraz.
Okay.
If you bet on those two guys, they would be about minus 500. And that's if you get the other 126 guys, including Djokovic. They've won the last 7 slams, so they are a massive favorite. And if Sinner probably is about plus 130 just to win it by himself.
Wow.
So I think Sinner, Alcaraz are a huge favorite. Obviously, Djokovic is basically only playing majors at the moment. And we have 2 Americans after that. I think Ben Shelton's had a great summer. So maybe you want to take a flyer on him. He's close to 30-1. And Taylor Fritz got to the final last year. On the women's side, Swiatek is all of a sudden playing way better. Coco Gauff is the 3rd favorite. And we've had an American woman in the last 4 consecutive slam finals. Look for that to happen again. Okay,
hold on. We got a shot at Coco. You used to coach Coco.
I did.
So she fired her coach. I think she might have fired you at one point.
It happens. If you're in this business long enough, you get the hook.
But she fired him a week before the tournament, which is kind of weird.
Well, she was struggling a little bit. She's looking for a little bit of lightning in the bottle. And sometimes, in tennis, it's not like you have teammates, you have a general man. If things aren't working, you make a move.
Has it ever been a situation where a coach has come in literally like at the last minute and somehow juiced and changed the whole dynamic for a player?
Yeah, it's happened definitely a few times. It's like a new relationship sometimes. It's not sometimes what the coach says. It's just a new voice can help. And if you're not feeling it, you're struggling it, we're in a results business, you can get the hook.
By the way, what are those conversations like? It sounds like you've had a whole bunch of them. You got in a lot of the good conversations where they call you and say, I need your help. And then invariably when things go sideways, they say,
they love you when the results are good.
Right.
And, it's like a stock analyst.
But they also know that you're going to be talking about them on television when it's all over.
One thing is really important. I'm sure you guys have heard. Yeah. You got to have thick skin. And you got to have confidence that what you're doing. When I'm coaching, the greatest thing about coaching is you're trying to help somebody fulfill their dreams. Try to help them become better. And you don't win the match, you don't lose the match, but you're really trying to help them get to another level. And that's your whole goal. And sometimes when the results aren't exactly what the player wants.
Right.
You know, and players now, we grow up in a completely different era. When I grew up, there was no social media, there was no cell phones, no computers. So now so
More
many of these
pressure.
kids
It's a lot
have
of
grown up
pressure.
their whole life with that. So they make changes a lot sooner. But one thing's for sure, if you're not playing tennis, you need to be playing tennis. If you play tennis 2-3 times a week after you're 35 years old, for the rest of your life, you'll live 9.7 years longer than everyone else.
Wow.
And in the last couple of years,
Right.
Forget Ozempic. Play tennis.
26 million people play tennis in the U.S. That's up a couple million from a few years ago.
How many people playing pickleball?
That's what I was going to say. What's the competition?
You know, pickleball is probably somewhere between 7 to 10 million.
Okay.
I play a little bit of pickleball, but pickleball is a lot harder on the body, a lot more jarring moves. But there's room for both. But obviously, there's no pickleball events that have a buzz like the U.S. Open or any major tennis tournament.
We're going to talk maybe about your stock picks in a second, but I'm curious just about companies and brands that are associated with the U.S. Open or even the players these days, and how much of a boost do you think they get? You know, obviously, you always see the Rolex sign in the back.
Chase.
There's
JP Morgan
Chase,
Heineken.
and then there are the brands on the court, which is, you know, Nike's there. I don't know how much Nike's investing in tennis anymore. Rogers tried to get into that space.
I like that stock.
I don't know if you like that stock.
I only like that stock because of Fed.
Okay, the ASICS folks. I don't know what, like in the old days, you'd see, you know, ads for Prince tennis rackets. You don't see that anymore.
IBM. I'm trying to think through.
Yeah,
these.
I mean, the big sponsors, like Chase is the most prevalent on the court,
Right.
Heineken, Rolex. You don't see so much of the tennis manufacturers because the price to be having, you know, a little real estate on the court is not exactly cheap. So they're big companies. But I really do believe that with 26 million people playing tennis, the sport is in a healthy place. I have a tennis shop for 20 years in Marin County, and we're 80-20 tennis to pickle. And
Okay.
a couple of years ago, it was 100-0.
Which of the brands are winning now in that space? Because I think they're probably very different than they were 15, 20 years
you
ago.
brought up Prince. They used to
Right.
be a player. They're dead and buried. But Wilson and Babolat probably are about 85 to 90% of the rackets. ASICS, Nike, On, Wilson shoes. Shoes are, everybody's foot is different. I always tell somebody instantly when you try on a pair of shoes, they don't feel right, throw them back in the box. You know, as you get older, your feet get wider. So feet are really important. And, it's like one of those things you don't tell somebody, this shoe is perfect for you unless you try it on. But rackets have gotten lighter, smaller grips. Tennis is constantly innovating.
Smaller grips. What do you mean?
Smaller grips, big time. When I was a kid, everybody played with bigger grips, heavier rackets. There was no kid options. Now there's great kid options. So now, like a normal size grip way back in the day, 4 3/8, 4 1/2. You see a lot of pros playing 4 1/4, 4 1/8.
Maybe I got to get a smaller grip going. Okay.
And you see it in baseball, smaller handle, so lighter, easier to maneuver, easier maybe to change your grip to get a little more spin. So it's constantly changing, and lighter is definitely better on your arm.
Okay,
Brad, I take it you don't gamble on any of these because you said, gambling, you're never going to win. You got to hit it 55% because of the vigorous. You're never going to win on that stuff. So you stick to investing, not gambling, right?
Absolutely. I mean, I used to bet, but then way back in the day. But obviously, tennis has become huge in betting. So I said the juice is about 10% in football.
Yeah.
In tennis, a lot of the juice is 30%.
Right.
So
That's a loser's game.
People love to bet, but the house is always going to win.
Right.
But I understand numbers. I'm a numbers guy.
We know that you also play the markets.
I love the
And we
market.
got some of your picks here. By the way, we're talking about On sneakers. There's also On semiconductor. I don't know if they got that right or
I am
if they're
definitely
missing.
not on semiconductor.
Okay.
I am on sneaker.
Okay.
And that
Trying to
one
make sure.
I like,
Guys,
I
flip,
like
flip
to,
the board.
Okay, get rid of on semiconductor.
Yeah, that's totally wrong.
So on, I like to buy and sell.
Okay.
When it gets a certain number, I sell.
What's that number?
Low 60s.
Okay.
And then I sell. So I've bought and sold that a lot the last 3 years. One that I constantly hold the last 10 years.
When do you sell, by the way? What's the? You said you when you're buying and selling On. You said 60 is the low for you?
No, 60 around, when it gets around 60,
Yeah.
I sell.
Okay.
And then now it's dropped to 44.
So
I'm buying back again a lot.
Okay.
So it has a up and down margin. Microsoft is the new bank.
Okay.
I've been telling my kids for the last 10 years, park your money at Microsoft. Anytime it dips, buy. I wish the dividend should be a little bit higher, but it's still a great place to park your money. The banks are a scam. You park your money there.
You mean checking and savings accounts? And,
you get no interest, and if you want to borrow, good luck on that.
Right.
And hopefully we don't have the savings, scandal of 2008. I actually am a little worried about that with this guy Powell. Thank God I'm on after doom and gloom today. Another one I love is Nvidia, which I think is another one. It's bounced down a little bit. Great buying opportunity. And another one that I've gotten really interested over the last, few weeks because of David Faber, the brain, a genius, is P-Sky. I think that's
Paramount.
I think there's a great opportunity in that space.
By the way, that stock was up 14.7%.
Yeah, it was yesterday.
Now, some are speculating. Barron's has an article wondering if it's a meme stock at this point because it's up 45%.
It is not a meme.
That was Barron's. That's what they said.
The Ellisons are a meme stock. No, I'm not buying that.
So quickly, there was no reason for it to be up 14.7% yesterday, or no.
Maybe it's because of the brain, David Faber. But there's a great buying opportunity there in that space. That stock was $100.
Yeah.
So it's come way down. So I do like to trade a little bit, but my core holdings, are stocks that I like. Literally, I will never sell Microsoft.
It's funny you say that because Bill Gates sold most of his stake. You have more faith in Microsoft than he has had.
I think, first of all, it's a great company. It's everywhere in the world. It's going to continue to grow. They're going into AI. They're innovating. They got ridiculous market. But like in any business, I don't think they're satisfied. They're constantly trying to evolve and get bigger and stronger, and trying to get to a younger audience. I like Nvidia. I wish I would have gotten in a lot earlier. I really jumped in April last year when I sold my ON when it did well. I went all in on Nvidia. Now back in on. So I do like to day trade sometimes.
Okay, final question coming from a very astute viewer. This is not about stocks, actually. This is about tennis again. What do you make of the mixed doubles sort of controversy that's been taking place? This idea that, the folks who play doubles all their life should be the ones playing this, not the single stars sort of encroaching on their space.
I'll stand up.
Yeah.
And I'm going to give a golf clap, bravo. Mixed doubles event was dying. The second week, if we played on the final, they had to literally give tickets to people to see 4 doubles players play. I know they play really well, but since we had singles players play, we had 78,000 over 2 days. It was a massive hit. And the defending champ, the only doubles team that they did let in, did win it. The prize money for 24 for the winning team was $200,000. You know what the prize money was for this year?
What?
For them winning? $1 million.
Okay, so you have no sympathy, it sounds like, for the doubles.
-0. And listen, the event was a huge success. Hopefully they will expand it a little bit more. So they did let 1 doubles team in. Maybe they let 4 in next year. But if we get in a situation where there's only doubles players that are playing on the Wednesday night, ticket holders are going to say, you know what, I want to see starts. That's a problem like they have in pickle, that they only show doubles, don't show singles on TV. That's my 2 cents.
You don't like pickleball, do you?
I like pickleball.
You sound competitive. It sounds like you're protecting your turf with tennis, even though your tennis shop sells some pickleball.
You know who I used to coach for 8 years, Andre Agassi?
Yeah.
He loves pickleball. He plays every day. I like it, but honestly, when I play, in tennis, I know my limitations.
Yeah.
Pickle, you warm up in about 30 seconds, you're playing. And the next day, I tell you get up,
you feel it.
back.
It's a smaller.
Yeah, because it's all small emotions. It's a hard court.
No, and you make these flying moves. You got to stop and slam on the brakes for the kitchen. I like the game, but I'm also a true believer that there's complete room for both. I'm not like a pickle hater. I'm not like a tennis person. Oh, no, there's not. If I had a club, listen, I'm having both businesses. I have a tennis shop. Why would I exclude pickle?
Right.
I say, come on in. It's healthy.
Sit back down. You're making the camera people nervous.
Okay, why am I making...
Thank you, Brad. We're going to say thank you. What a fabulous interview. We really
I appreciate it.
Have fun
Come out
there.
to the tennis.
We'll be out there.
We love having you in studio.
Thanks.
Too.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
That's the podcast for today and for the week. Thank you for tuning in. Squawk Box is hosted by Joe Kernan, Becky Quick, and Andrew Ross Sorkin. Weekday mornings on CNBC starting at 6 Eastern and going all the way until 9. To get the smartest takes and analysis from that TV show right into your ears, follow us on Squawk Pod wherever you're listening now. We'll meet you right back here on Monday. Enjoy your weekend.
We are clear. Thanks, guys.